Hello, my name's Anthony Hughes. I want to talk to you today about some developments that happened politically and the effect on the rule of law. Let me first explain what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Christmas party. That obviously happened, or several Christmas parties in Downing Street. Now, you may say, well, what's this got to do with the rule of law, and what is the rule of law, and why is it so important? All questions I'm going to address now. The rule of law is the constitutional principle behind our constitution, our unwritten constitution. And it states, effectively, Lord Bingham, who's a law lord, states, all persons and authorities within the state, whether public or private, should be bound by and entitled to the benefits of laws publicly and prospectively promulgated and publicly administered in the court. And it's a principle that goes back hundreds of years, since Magna Carta, so to speak. It is the principle behind writs of habeas corpus, saying you have no right to imprison me without due trial and a proper court process. And one of the principles behind it is mentioned here, that we are collectively bound as a society under what some philosophers call a social contract, i.e. the rulers are allowed to rule with our consent, provided they rule within the Constitution. And when they don't rule within the Constitution, then the public has no obligation to obey their laws. That's the principle behind the social contract, and that's a very old point of legal philosophy. This is a little different because we're not saying that if the government breaks a law, then all the bets are off. It's about the whole population and the principle of following the law. In our unwritten constitution, we require that everyone obeys the law, and that means everyone. So Lord Bingham's quote, let's go back to it. All persons and authorities within the state, whether public or private, should be bound by. Okay, so let's stop there. What does that mean, bound by? Well, the law should apply equally for all those who rule, who are involved in the state, and all those who are not. Now do you see the problem? The problem is that it appears that there's massive hypocrisy in the fact that last Christmas, or just before Christmas, everyone was obliged to stay separate, not go into groups and have parties. Everyone knew the rules and everyone was expected to obey them, and the police were there to enforce the laws, laws, but they were laws, enforce the laws and to issue summonses and send people to court if they didn't. Now we've got a situation apparently here where in number 10 Downing Street there have been parties going on. Now it really does insult everyone's intelligence to suggest that no parties happened. I see no parties. No parties took place here. clearly there were parties. So if there were parties, then that requires, under the rule of law, that if they were breaking the law, they be punished too, if it comes to light. Obviously, if no offences come to light, then people get away with it, and some crime people get away with, and some crime people get caught for, but it's a crime. But so far, we've been told that there's no evidence and the police aren't going to investigate. Well, that's a second problem under the rule of law principle, because the police are there to act fairly and administer the law as is. They are not there to decide when to investigate a crime and when not to investigate a crime if it's under political pressure. Now, the Commissioner may say, oh, there's no evidence, move along, there's nothing happened here a year ago. But there's stacks of evidence. We've all seen the video. But whoever took the video has it on their phone. And is it possible that they also have on their phone the video of, or some videos of the parties that they attended? Is it possible that the police actually did know about the parties? I find it highly unlikely that the police who were guarding 10 Downing Street wouldn't notice people leaving Downing Street who were clearly had been drinking and leaving in groups late at night. I think there's highly likely to be some communication with their superiors about this and say, this is what's going on. Now that then begs the question, how high up did those conversations go? Because it's implausible to suggest that all those people, 40 odd people piling out of a number 10 Downing Street, who'd had a few drinks and played a few party games, would be as silent as church mice, would not be slightly inebriated, would not be drunk. Of course, some of them would be drunk. And of course, they have to pass through gates and security. So, by passing through gates and security, the police must have, in all probability, I didn't say on the criminal burden of proof, but in all probability, noticed. And if the police radio in, if there's communication, there are logs logged in, there are conversations recorded on the police national computers and the logs for the Metropolitan Police for all incidents. All these things potentially are evidence. Then we've got the fact that they log in and log out. And even if they do that electronically, it obviously records them entering the building, what time they entered, and leaving the building, what time they left the building, for security purposes. So there's evidence straight away of the people who left late. Those are the people the police could interview. Not only that, the Prime Minister made a promise in question time yesterday, and the promise was to the leader of the opposition that he would hand over the results of the inquiry that he's asked to be conducted to the police. Well, the police have already said, well, there's nothing to see here and there's no evidence. Isn't that a bit premature? Isn't that strange? How is that applying the rule of law? How is that constitutionally appropriate? It isn't. Not in my view. We all benefit from laws being publicly and prospectively promulgated, i.e. written down and administered publicly in the court. We don't benefit from police commissioners deciding whether to investigate or not and saying, well, we're not going to investigate because there's no evidence, when there clearly is evidence. Let me give you an example. It would be like going to a armed robbery and not checking the CCTV and not taking the name and addresses of witnesses. Of course, there is no evidence until you start collecting it. Now, I speak from experience in that regard because many years ago, for 12 years, I was a police officer in Liverpool, and until the 1990s. And I investigated hundreds and hundreds of different crimes. And there often is just an allegation at the start of a crime. But we're not in that position today. We've got a bigger thing than just an allegation. We have evidence. We have videos. We have potential evidence from the signing in and signing out. We have witnesses to go and see. The commissioner may argue, wrongly in my view, but she may argue that effectively that she would be treating the people more harshly than others by investigating it after a year. Well, on the other hand, there is no statute of limitation for crime. Crimes committed, they don't lapse just because of time in this country. The other problem is that if there was evidence at the time, then the police were prosecuting people all over the country, left, right and centre, for holding parties and breaking COVID regulations. And those people are still appearing in the courts. And they're being punished for breaking COVID regulations, yet the people who work at number 10 aren't. How does that follow the rule of law? Why does it matter? Well, it makes it more difficult for the police to police because they are not seen as being fair, unbiased, and ready to investigate without fear or favour. They are seen as a tool of the state. And that's not good. That's not good for democracy, and it's not good for the rule of law. And next issue is, well, if it's simply ignored and said it's not important, then what's the point of Parliament if Parliament are going to be lied to? Or if people are going to get away with lying to Parliament, or get away with not being held accountable, that means trust with the public will be broken. And remember what I said about the social contract theory, that that the society is based on a contract of being by the ruled, and the ruled people who are rulers, that they will behave within the agreement, the written and unwritten constitution in this country. And the consequences of that are, we've got a small police force. I know it sounds big, 100,000 or so, 110,000 maybe now. But we've got 65 to 70 million people in this country. If enough people aren't prepared to follow the rule of law, or aren't prepared to follow the laws are very difficult to enforce, because that's what happened with the poll tax. It became impossible to enforce. It's impossible to enforce in the courts and everyone else, because if everyone starts ignoring what the government are saying or what the law is saying, that brings the law into disrepute. It also makes it very difficult for the police, because the police, who are there to administer the law, are seen as an arm of the state, even more than normally. So I thought it was worth a chat at this stage, because I think that the unwritten constitution and the principles of the rule of law are an important philosophy behind what is actually happening now. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Don't forget to subscribe.